Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael Aun Weor. Gnosis is the root wisdom of the world's greatest knowledge. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of hundreds available as free downloads, podcasts, or transcriptions. Our lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. We invite you to browse our library of lectures to find teachings that suit you. Twice a month, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live and includes a free online classroom allowing listeners to see images, read related scriptures, and ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate, visit gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is a service of Glorianne Publishing, a non-profit organization. The lectures and radio broadcast have been made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. Most spiritual schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. To make a donation, visit gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
Continuing with the theme that we established in the previous lecture about the elements in our spiritual progress, we will advance our understanding of those elements and see how they apply to us practically. In every spiritual tradition, we talk about basic elements that are material and energetic. But since we know that every manifested thing is a trinity of matter, energy, and consciousness, then we have to understand that the basic elements are also elements of consciousness, not just matter and energy. So the four elements make up everything that we are on every level. The four primary elements. But the question really is how those four elements relate to the fifth element. How we work with that fifth element. And that was what we talked about in the previous lecture. The fifth element, or the quintessence. The quintessence relates to the Akash, or the ether. In Sanskrit terms, we can also say it's Kundalini. It is the Prakriti, the root energy that in some religions is symbolized as the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother is that creative force or intelligence in nature that gives life to everything. If we want spiritual life, we need to know our Divine Mother. And her active agent is the quintessence, which is an energy in us. We need that energy to be active, and right now it is not. It's passive, latent. What in science we could call static, non-kinetic energy. So the basis to understand how to awaken that, how to activate that, has been hidden in every religion and mystical tradition. In the West, it's most famously known in the tradition that we call alchemy. The entire tradition of alchemy is a symbolic presentation of a practical science. Alchemy hides the the knowledge of how to elaborate the full potential of a human being, which is hidden in all of our atoms and cells. To do that, we need to know about transmutation. This word transmutation gets utilized a lot in esoteric traditions, but it appears that it's utilized without much knowledge of what the word really means. So it's important that we analyze this word and understand what it means, where it comes from, what it implies. Transmutation is derived from Latin roots, and its implication is far beyond what most esoteric traditions attribute to it. Trans means thoroughly, and mutare means change. The word transmutation really came into use because of the tradition of alchemy. To transmute means to completely change something. In the modern Gnostic movement, for example, this word transmutation is most of the time used exclusively in relation with sexual energy, which is a valid use of the word, but it's not its full meaning, and it's not its original use. The word transmutation originally was applied to our entire being, to everything about us. Really, to transmute comes from that famous phrase from alchemy, to transmute lead into gold. It means to purge the lead, which is a dense, heavy, impure metal, and reduce it to its quintessence. In other words, to reduce it to its basic components, that which it originally made it, and from that to perfect it. You see, everything that exists is constructed of those basic elements that we explained in the previous lecture. First, akash, or ether. And that becomes disarranged or particularized into air, fire, water, and earth. And those four basic elements, whether physical, energetic, or conscious, become everything that exists. So everything that we are is four elements arranged in particular sequences. Physically, we call it DNA. But that physical encoding encodes also spiritual and conscious data, or combinations of elements. And those elements, which are physically sequenced in series of four, if you've ever studied DNA, it's made of four basic proteins or amino acids that are arranged in infinite combinations to create everything that we are. Those sequences of four are a reflection of the four elements. So for us to become something new means that we need to unzip the sequence that makes who we are and reconnect it in a superior way. But how are you going to disarrange everything about yourself and rearrange it? Especially when you're the one trying to do it. Not easy, but this is what to transmute really means. It means to thoroughly change. Gnosis is a science of transmutation. Yes, it begins with sexual energy. That's the root energy that makes the full and complete transmutation possible. But we don't seek to only transmute sexual energy. We want to transmute our matter as well. Our consciousness, our psyche, our soul, everything. To thoroughly change, to transmute. And interestingly, the result of that is a mutant. A mutant. Someone different. Someone changed. This word mutant has a negative connotation nowadays, but in reality, every existing creature is a mutation, a mutant. What we want is a conscious mutation, a change for the better, a change towards something beneficial and positive, something useful, something that will bring harmony and peace, not discord and violence. We want a change that will bring about goodness, equality, harmony, love. For that type of change, we need to thoroughly change the causes of discord, the causes of suffering. And those causes are in us, in our matter, in our energy, in our consciousness. So a genuine transmutation requires that the causes or the origins of problems and pain and suffering are changed thoroughly so that new things can emerge. That change is not easy. If you consider how anything in nature changes, fundamentally changes, it's a process of birth, growth, decline, death, rebirth, growth, decline, and death. This is how evolution advances, through small mutations over time. If you've ever studied biology or evolution, you can see that this is how species grow. And they grow because of the pressures put on them by their environment. They change and adapt and hopefully improve. We need the same thing. Unfortunately, we are not responding properly to the pressures that are upon us. The psychological, material, social, physical pressures that are on us now, we are not mutating ourselves properly to respond to them. If we were, we would be transcending the problems. We would be adapting and overcoming them so that they would not be problems anymore. Instead, we see that the problems are deepening, that we are not changing fast enough in the right way. So we need to know how to do it, how to transmute. And Samael Aun Weor said, no one can self-realize without transmutation. In this context, from this book, Tarot and Kabbalah, he was not talking about sexual transmutation. He was talking about transmutation of the psyche, of the mind, of the heart, and the body. To change thoroughly. Stated in another way, you can transmute your sexual energy, but if you don't transmute your mind, you will not self-realize. Everything that we are is made up of these elements. So when we study the tree of life, our primary interest in the tree of life is how it applies to us here and now. Of course, the tree of life maps all levels of existence. But those levels of existence are meaningless if we cannot access them. Studying and memorizing scriptures and teachings mean nothing if we cannot experience what they point towards. So we need to examine this tree of life in relation with ourselves and understand that these 10 Sephiroth relate to levels of being in us. And that here on this graphic, we see not only our physical state, but our psychological state. So on this image, while we see a physical body to remind us that this relates to us here and now, really all these spheres or levels show our levels of psychological being. And we see two divisions, or two sides. The superior part related to heavens or superior aspects of being, and an inferior part that hangs below, which is called klipot, or hell. And this aspect relates to the inferior or inverted aspect of our psyche. Everything on this map is composed of elements. Air, fire, water, and earth. All of which hang in the Akash. So in this context, if we use our imagination and we look at how this applies to us here and now, everything about us is encoded in elements. Here physically we can sense those physical aspects. Our physical body is an encoded series of elements reflected in our DNA. But as well, our entire psychological makeup is encoded in us, but we only hazily perceive it. We hazily perceive it as thoughts and feelings and certain types of sensations physically. But we don't really perceive or comprehend that all of those thoughts and feelings and impulses are driven by matter and energy that is not physical. And this is the real problem that we have. Really open up your imagination and analyze yourself. Look at how you have a physical body here and now. This body is composed of a trinity of elements: matter, energy, and consciousness. The consciousness here is not asleep, is not awake, it's very asleep. But there is some degree of consciousness here. Thoughts, feelings, and other impulses are more subtle, but still we can perceive that they have some level of manifestation. We can verify that they are there somehow. They also have matter, energy, and consciousness, but not in the physical dimension. Those thoughts that you sense and the feelings that you sense are modifications of consciousness that vibrate and exist because they have matter and energy associated with them, but not physically. What we experience physically is their reflection, like light that's being bounced through a mirror. We have the mirror of our mind, which reflects the contents of our thoughts and feelings. But where are the thoughts? Where are the feelings? They're not in the brain, because you can experience thoughts and feelings when you're out of your body. So where are they? This is the problem we have. We don't know. And the problem is compounded because we need to change rapidly. Otherwise, we're threatened with grave problems, even worse problems than we have now. So we need to transmute all these psychological elements very quickly. How? If we can't see them, if we can't sense them, how can we change them? How can you work in the dark? How can a blind person create a piece of art if he can't even see what he's doing? This is our fundamental challenge. Psychologically, spiritually, we are blind. How then can we create a perfect soul if we can't see what we're doing? How can we transmute ourselves into something better if we can't even see who we really are? For this, we need help. We need to understand how these elements work in all the levels of nature. So to remind you, these are the 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And all things are composed by them. And understanding that, we need to look at how those elements manifest and start to analyze our psychology. Start to see it for what it is. To remind you of the previous lecture, these elements do not refer merely to the literal physical aspects. They are psychological. In order to transmute yourself, you need to know what you're working with. You need to see yourself. You need to see how your mind functions, how your heart functions, how all of the sensations that you experience flow. You need to see what parts of your psyche are expansive. What is the relative mobility of your thinking and feeling? What about its temperature, its fluidity, its solidity? In this way, you can analyze the elements that are involved. you can understand how to manage the elements in your experiences psychologically. And as we explained in the previous lecture, we get help with this process through what we call ordeals. These are psychological challenges that we're given by our own innermost through our psychological trainer, who presents us with scenarios designed to bring out those parts of ourselves that we need to work on. If we're not prepared to see it, we will respond poorly to the way we have been doing, and we will make our situation worse. If we are not psychologically trained to watch ourselves and look for the patterns in our psychology, we will not see what's really happening to us, and we will make mistakes. When you enter into this type of work, and you enter into the process of starting to transmute yourself, you are given challenges, opportunities to see yourself as you are. And those opportunities will come every day. Every day. And if you're really attentive, you'll find that those opportunities are continually arising. All the time. Now, we don't call them opportunities physically. We call them adversities. We call them problems. We call them suffering. We have all of our complaints. Anyone here not have any complaints? Yeah, good for you. One guy, he's happy. You don't need to be here, really. If you have no complaints, I mean, you're basically done. We have an old psychological habit that is a very serious obstacle in this type of study, this type of work. And that is the habit of self-esteem. It's an old habit that thinks that we deserve things that we don't deserve. And that wants things ideal and the way we want it. And we get very frustrated and very upset when things don't go the way we want or expect. I actually am quite curious what percentage of people listening to the lecture today are very disappointed they didn't win the lottery last night. I would like to find that out, but I don't think anybody will tell me. You see, we all have this self-esteem. And this self-esteem is in direct conflict with gnosis, with the innermost, with the being. Because this self of self-esteem is the ego. And the being wants the ego dead. Dead. Dissolved. Transmuted. But we don't want to transmute it. We want things the way we want them. And when we don't get the things we want them, what do? Anybody know? We complain. We complain in our mind, and we complain with our mouth. And many of us complain all the time. And that's a sign. It's a very significant sign that we are not transmuting. Another word for transmutation is transformation. And we use that in a very important phrase in this teaching. It's called the transformation of impressions. Someone who's transforming impressions has serenity, has acceptance. In other words, they have no complaints. So if we have a lot of complaints, we need to analyze the desires that are complaining. The pride, the lust, the envy, the greed, the gluttony, the fear, the avarice, the laziness. All those elements. And we need to analyze them in relation with these elements. Space, air, fire, water, and earth. to understand how they're made, how they work, how they function, to not just go with the flow of our psychological river, but to fight it. Because the psychological river of our mind is flowing into hell. It's not taking us to God. To reach God, you have to fight against everything that comes up in yourself that is impure, that is selfish. And that's not easy. So these elements are the basic tools that our psychological trainer uses in order to show us ourselves, to show us what we are made of, literally what we are made of. Not physically, psychologically. The physical part is impermanent and irrelevant. Spiritually speaking, we've had so many bodies and likely to have so many more. The physical part is not important in the long-term perspective. What's important is the psychological part, because that lasts. From the psychological point of view, what are we made of? We're made of these elements in different combinations, but unfortunately corrupted with desire. In order to transmute these elements, we have to break them down. Imagine if you were a weaver and you got really drunk and you used up all your good cloth, your good fibers, your good materials, and you wove something. And then you sobered up a little bit and realized that what you wove was a complete disaster and wouldn't do anybody any good. And in fact was a waste of all that material. But that's the only material you have. And you need clothes. What do? You have to take it apart. You have to go back to zero. You have to be naked and start again. And we need to do that psychologically. We need to strip our identity completely. This self-esteem has to die. We have to renounce everything except God. To only hold fast to divinity. Nothing else. This is the only way that you can fully and completely transmute. Remember, transmute means to thoroughly change. Thoroughly, not partially. Thoroughly, from the ground up, from zero. It's the only way to build something properly. This is why Jesus told us we need a new wineskin, a new garment, a new mind, a new heart, a new body. That transmutation comes through these elements. So we're tested every day, constantly, by our trainer through these elements to pull things out psychologically so we'll see them for what they are. This is not for fun and games. It isn't just to punish us. It isn't to humiliate us. It isn't to make us suffer just because we deserve it. It's to help us. It is the medicine we need. We're sick. To be healed, we have to have a very profound surgery. Very profound, very deep, very painful. It's not easy. It is not easy to die psychologically. And it is not pleasant. It is not something that you will enjoy. You will be in pain. You will cry. You will have regret. You will have remorse. You will be ashamed of yourself. And you should be. Don't avoid it. embrace it. And don't take it to heart. Look squarely at the facts, accept them, and change. This is how you become spiritually mature. You don't avoid the facts. You look them in the face, you see them for what they are, and you change them. Thoroughly. And don't look back. This means that when you're getting your psychological challenges every day, you look them square in the face. You accept them. You accept responsibility for yourself. You don't blame others. You don't blame God. You accept it. You look at it and you say, I deserve this. I created this. Now I'm going to change it. This is what a master comes from. Everybody wonders, how do the masters become so beautiful? How do they become so humble, so pure? Because they're honest. That's why. Because they're honest. And they don't avoid the facts. And they work hard to change, to become worthy of reflecting God. So the way that this is done is through this fifth element that we talked about before. Everything that we are is constructed of these basic elements. So our pride, for example, is constructed of those elements. In order to become humble, to have real humility, the humility of an angel. The humility of an angel is constructed of the same elements that your pride is made from. Isn't that odd? It's constructed of the same light, but it's arranged differently. Because the pride of an angel, that element, that light that has to do with virtue of esteem or self-nature, is not corrupted by desire, where ours is. That is a solar light. What we call pride here is a modified light that comes from the sun. It's the same light that shines in an angel, but as humility. It's the same light, but in us it's modified, corrupted. It's the same elements. What shines in that psychological component is the quintessence. But in us, it's impure. In an angel, in a master, it's pure. You see, quintessence comes from a root word which means to be. Quintessence is the being, the light of the being that shines through any psychological element. Everything that we are as a psyche is the light of the being, but corrupted. If you want that light to be pure, you need to break apart the lens and reform it to make it perfect, clean. This is the basic science of alchemy, to purge the metals and make them pure. We could throw out the word metals and put crystals or lenses, and it would be the same thing. The quintessence is that light, what in Hebrew is called Shekinah, the light of the Divine Mother. That light shines through everything that we are, psychologically and physically. It shines as all those elements arranged in all those different patterns that make up all the different people and things and plants and animals and minerals and everything that exists is that light, but modified. What we are as a person is a huge complication of all those lights. But we don't see them for what they are. We need to. So to emphasize again, we need to analyze ourselves physically, energetically, emotionally, intellectually, and consciously. You see, this graphic shows the basic psyche that we can perceive here and now, if we look. And all of these psychological elements that we can perceive here and now are related to other forms of matter. Physically, we see our physical body. If you pay attention, you'll recognize that this physical body has energy that lets it be active and move. Not only the energy of digestion and the circulation of blood, and the energy that flows through the muscles and the senses and the nerves, but we have the energy that flows through the psyche that lets us have imagination and memory and thought and feeling. All those energies are related with the vital body, what in the Tree of Life is called Yasod. And that is only reflecting the contents of thought, emotion, and will into the physical body. Everything we perceive physically is reflected, either through the 5 physical senses or through the internal senses that we perceive inside. The vital body reflects that contents into our brain, into our heart. This is important to understand so that we have a clear perspective on how to analyze ourselves. When we're feeling emotions, those emotions don't originate in the physical body. They aren't just vapor. They aren't just imaginary. They are reflected forms of light. They are light that we feel and sense emotionally in the physical body, but that's being reflected through the vital body from our astral body. And in the astral body is where that light is coming. It's the strongest source of where we can see it. And that means that if we're feeling a negative emotion, we need to work on it at that level. In the 5th dimension, where it's originating. But how many of us have clairvoyance? How many of us are awake in the astral plane, in the 5th dimension, to work on the source of that discursive negative emotion? None of us. We're asleep. Moreover, when we sleep at night and we're dreaming with those emotions, we don't remember. So our trainer has no choice but to put ordeals to us in the physical world so that we can see and experience what's happening in that astral body, so that it's reflected here physically, so it will come up and we will work on it. Not be enslaved by it anymore, because internally we're asleep and we're enslaved. So to help us, our trainer gives us ordeals. Our trainer puts us in circumstances where we feel those emotions so that our consciousness, our willpower, can see it and can respond consciously, not mechanically, but can comprehend and free itself. This is why we have ordeals. We need them. Don't complain. In several places in the Bible, it states very clearly, the man that God chastises is the man that God loves. Let no one complain when God chastises him, because that's a sign of love. That chastisement or those ordeals are given for help, to help us, to aid us. Otherwise, we won't see who we are and what's stopping us from reaching God. So this applies to all of our emotions, all of our thoughts, all of our problems, all of our situations, all of our circumstances, everything that's bothering us or that we think is limiting us or is a problem for us is actually something that we need to take advantage of. And that's why Samael Aun Weor said, the worst adversities are the best opportunities to awaken. So why are all the Gnostics looking for easy lives? Looking to win the lottery, looking to retire in the countryside and grow sunflowers or whatever. If you have an easy, laid-back life, you will stagnate spiritually. You will rot. If you want to grow spiritually, you need to die psychologically. And the only way you will do that is by seeing the garbage in your mind and in your heart. So that's why we get ordeals. So, that's why Samael said, we can disintegrate our defects and dissolve the psychological I only by means of this science of transmutations. We can modify our errors, transmute the vile metals into pure gold, and command only by means of the science of transmutations. Again, this transmutation does not apply simply to sexual energy. It's to everything. To everything about us. Everything must change. In another book, this one's from Torah and Kabbalah. In another book he said, it is possible to crystallize the soul within ourselves by dissolving the animal ego. We need to dissolve the undesirable psychological elements in order to crystallize the soul within ourselves. We must convert ourselves into pure soul. With patience, you will possess your soul. This is possible based on conscious work and voluntary suffering. The souls of people reside in a superior level of being. The soul is the conjunction of all the forces, powers, virtues, essences, etc., that crystallize within us when the entire animal ego has been dissolved. Each time that a psychological defect is dissolved, a virtue, a power, etc., crystallizes within our interior. The complete dissolution of all the defects implies the integral crystallization of the soul within ourselves. If the water does not boil at 100 degrees, that which must be crystallized does not crystallize. And that which must be dissolved is not dissolved. In a similar way, we can say that it is necessary to pass through great emotional crises in order to dissolve psychological defects and crystallize the soul. He wrote that in the Pistis Sophia Unveiled. So let's understand what this means. Firstly, this is based on conscious work and voluntary suffering. Voluntary suffering means that we accept our suffering. We don't fight it in the sense of resisting it or denying it or trying to change our physical circumstances all the time. Instead, we accept it. We do what we need to do to survive and care for our responsibilities. That's enough. The rest of our effort should be focused on changing ourselves. So the soul, he says here, is the conjunction of all the forces, powers, virtues, etc., and they crystallize us when the animal ego has been dissolved. So that's transmutation. You see, each ego, each construction in the psyche, is made of those elements. We dissolve that to liberate all the elements that are there, and then those elements automatically, spontaneously, and naturally emerge as the soul. In other words, the quintessence is freed. And from there, there's a great range of potential. That depends on the nature of our path, what happens with that energy. But whatever the nature of that path, it will be positive. The other important thing he points out here is that if the water does not boil at 100 degrees, that which must be crystallized does not crystallize. And that which must be dissolved is not dissolved. So what is that water? Water is one of the elements. Where is the water in us? What water is it that must boil? Anybody know? Well, it's a sort of trick question, because everything about us is based in water. There's no exception. Everything. When we look at the Hebrew letters, the three mother letters that we mentioned previously, primarily the element of water, which is the letter mem, is related with the vital body. That is the lower Eden, or Mayim, in the book of Genesis. That is our waters, our creative waters, from which we create everything, physically, spiritually, psychologically. Those are our creative waters, the waters of Genesis in us. But in addition, the physical body is mostly water. Without it, we can't live. The emotional body is very strongly influenced by water. Our emotions are a sea. The mental body also is constructed with the element of water, and so is the causal body. Water is in everything. Everything that exists depends on water, physically, energetically, and consciously. So when the water must boil, it means that our entire psyche must boil. And what is the boiling? It's problems. Difficulties. You see, when you study how physics works, when you study how nature works, you find that crystallization and dissolution are very closely related. And the entire science of alchemy is based on this understanding. This is why if you study any of the old alchemical texts, they always talk about the need to dissolve and coagulate or crystallize. And the entire science of alchemy is based on that. One short example is from the bosom book of George Ripley, where he said, "Then mingle with this white calx the fiery water, and distill it with a strong fire, all of before, and calcine the earth again that remaineth in the bottom of the still, and distill it again with a strong fire as before, and again calcine it, and thus distill and calcine it 7 times. Sounds abstract, and it sounds unclear. But when you read here further, he says, "Then thou hast the water of life rectified and made indeed spiritual, and so hast thou the 4 elements exalted in the virtue of their quintessence. This water will dissolve all bodies and putrefy them and purge them. This is our mercury and our lunary. And whosoever thinketh there is any other water than this is an ignorant and a fool, and shall never be able to come to the effect." That's from a very famous text of alchemy. It's only one example of hundreds that explain that the process of purification and the elaboration of the quintessence is a process of dissolution and crystallization. And of course, foolish people who don't have initiation into the science read those things literally and thought they were talking about literal water, literal physical mercury, literal physical elements. But they weren't. They were talking about the psyche, the mind. The dissolution is psychological, and it's accomplished through these ordeals, through analyzing and dissolving impurities in the mind. In relation with the moon, which the bosom book of George Ripley calls our lunary, from lunar, we have a light in our psyche, a psychological element that unfortunately we have corrupted. And that light that the moon, or Gabriel, gives us freely, we have converted it to avarice. We have converted it into selfishness, attachment. that light should be altruism or generosity. And in esotericism, we study basic 7 components of the psyche, 7 symbolic components. And it's interesting to me that these 7 begin with altruism. Because in Asian traditions, if you study the paramitas, which are conscious attributes of bodhisattvas, they also begin with generosity. It's the first paramita. And that's because without altruism, you cannot create the soul. You cannot. And that's why Samael Aun Weor repeated many times, those who do not give to others cannot self-realize. Those who do not give are not given. Altruism is the very basis of the psyche of a master. Generosity. A true master does not ask, they only give. And if we aspire to become that, that is where we must begin. Working with altruism. And to do that, we have to find our avarice, our greed, our attachment, and dissolve it and rebuild it into generosity. How do we do it? Well, our trainer will help us. Our trainer will help us every day. Our psychological trainer, not a physical teacher. Our own being will present us with circumstances in which our attachments will be tested all the time. This type of generosity applies to everything. We always immediately associate it with money. It's related with money, but it's also related with time. It's also related with energy. We are very attached to our time, to our attention, to our energy, not just to physical things, but psychological things. Avarice does not apply only to material things. It also applies to knowledge, to the teachings. There are many people who have great teachings, but they are very greedy with them and only give them out with a little spoon because they want to retain their power. They are greedy with knowledge, and they want power. They're greedy with attention. They want attention from others, and they know the only way they can keep that attention is if they only give a little bit, just enough to keep people coming. That's greed. We all have this in different ways. But to become truly generous, we have to transmute our avarice into altruism. And that means that we have to see our altruism and destroy it. Related with Mercury, we find that the light of Christ reflects through Mercury as diligence. Great conscious activity. Mercury is a very active planet. Mercury is the messenger of the gods. It's stated in esotericism that without Mercury, there could be no self-realization. And this is true. It's true in relation to Mercury as a psychosexual component, but it's also true as a psychological, spiritual component. Because Mercury is diligence of consciousness, diligence of soul. It's really the diligence of the being working through the human soul. And a master has that. A master works diligently on behalf of their innermost, doing the work of their innermost for others through generosity. So we see these two elements very active in the masters. Diligently enacting the will of their God on behalf of others for generosity towards others. Great activity. of the consciousness. But we have laziness instead. Spiritually, we are very lazy. Consciously, we are very lazy. Even those who call themselves serious Gnostics are very lazy. The very thought that we are serious is a sign of laziness. That itself proves laziness. Because the one who's really serious knows that they are not. If the ego is alive, we are not serious. If any shred of ego is alive, it is enough to take us to hell. That shred, that atom, is enough to cause the ego to reemerge in completion, completely, totally. It's a seed. So the only ones who are truly serious are resurrected masters. That's it. Even great Buddhas, Nirvanis, Shravakiyanas, Pratyekas, Devas, Jinns, who are very high levels of consciousness but still have ego, are not serious. Because the ego is alive. So we cannot call ourselves serious. We have to realize that we are very lazy until the ego is completely transmuted. 100%. Related with Venus, the light of Christ, the light of the being, reflects through Venus as chastity. And naturally, obviously, we don't have that. We've converted the light of Venus into lust. Mythologically, Venus has this duality. If you study the myths of Venus or Aphrodite, where we see in some cases that Venus is a great virgin and very pure, and in other cases is a prostitute. And this duality is reflected in our psyche. We have converted the Venusian light in our consciousness into a prostitute. And I will make you a solemn promise that the day you see that in yourself, you will weep. Bitter tears. When you see your own inner Venus and what you have done to her, and how her purity has been smeared with filth, you will weep. Related with the sun, the light of the being, which should be a profound humility, has been converted into pride. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that pride is self-esteem. That pride is very subtle. It's not just the person who boastfully walks around. Pride weeps over its own misfortunes. Pride complains about life, about everything. Pride is the one who feels abandoned, who feels mistreated, who feels misjudged. Pride is the one who orchestrates the rest of the ego. It is our pride that prevents us from being honest with ourselves. The light of Mars is the light of the being that reflects as love. But unfortunately, we've converted that love into hate, which is anger. Same thing. We don't like to think of anger as hate because we like to protect our anger and use it as our shield and our defense. But anger is a crime. Anger is not a virtue. Anger is demonic. The gods have ferocity, but we cannot mistake that for anger. The ferocity of the gods was represented in many myths. For example, when Jesus cast the merchants out of the temple. This is a symbol of the Christ purging our mind of attachment. And we always interpret that scripture as Jesus being angry, but that's just because of how it was written in English. In reality, he's displaying the wrathful aspect of God, which we see beautifully displayed in Tibetan and Hindu mysticism. That is not anger, it is ferocity. Mars has that. Mars can be very ferocious, but it's a sign of love. It's the love of the mother protecting her child. It's very ferocious, not angry. It's ferocious. Virtuous. We need that. The light of Christ that reflects through Jupiter is, in its purity, it's happiness for others. But we've converted that into envy. Instead of being happy for the successes and health and benefits that others enjoy, we want it for ourselves. So we're all waiting to see who won the lottery so we can envy them. It's very rare for us to feel happiness for others. Nowadays, in this contemporary era, envy is very active. We don't even realize it. But the entirety of our social structure is based on envy. Our modern structure. And in fact, 100% of our media is based on envy. The movies, the commercials, the magazines, the books, it's all rotating around your envy, manipulating it, utilizing it to get your money and to get power over you. And the light of Christ that reflects through Saturn should be temperance. But instead, we turned it into gluttony. We often think of gluttony just as related with food. It isn't. We are gluttonous with attention. We are gluttonous with our intellect through stuffing ourselves with the internet, TV, theories, books, music. We're gluttonous with that soap opera. We are gluttonous with shopping. We are gluttonous with anything that feeds our inner emptiness. Some of us are gluttonous with profit. Anything that we use to try to put a Band-Aid over that inner sense of lack of fulfillment or lack of belonging or lack of security, that inner hunger psychologically, anything we use to fill that is gluttony. Even lust. Many people are very gluttonous with their lust, or gluttonous with their pride, or gluttonous with their hyperactivity, which is a sign of laziness. You see, the ordeals that we will face will pull these 7 elements out, but not one at a time. We're not in kindergarten psychologically. We are in a very complex state psychologically. When we get ordeals, all of these things will be active. Have you ever seen, I'm sure most people nowadays have seen when you're in the car or you're using a stereo and you have a little meter that shows all the different levels of sound from the bass end to the treble end, and all those different levels are constantly moving. Your psychological state is like that. And all those different levels are all these different elements. When you've got a problem at work and someone's gossiping about you, clearly it's going to affect your pride. But it's also going to affect your envy, because you're going to wish that you were like that other guy that nobody talks about and that nobody criticizes and everybody loves them. So your pride's at play, your envy's at play. But also your laziness is engaged because you're not observing yourself. You're not remembering yourself. You're not transforming that adversity into benefit. So you're asleep. That's laziness. And your gluttony could be active because you want the attention that you were getting before when people were praising you. And you're doing everything you can to get that attention back, to feed that hunger psychologically. So you see, it's complicated. You can't just relax back in your chair and go, yeah, that's pride. It's not that simple. The mind is very complex. Moreover, all 7, these are just symbolic. There is not an ego of lust. We have many lustful egos, and some of them are very proud, and some of them are very shameful, some of them are envious, some of them are gluttonous, some of them are lazy, some of them are very arrogant. Moreover, they are all made of the 4 elements. Some are very grounded, earthy, fixed. They want things a specific way. Some are very airy and capable of great changes and diversity. Some are watery and some are fiery. And this is true of any of these elements. We tend to think of lust as a fire. It is fiery. So is anger. Anger is fiery. But no ego is made of one element. Just like the body is not made of one element. It's a combination of elements. The egos are the same way. Moreover, these egos are not vague. They only appear vague to us because we don't see them where they are, where they originate. They originate in the psyche, in klipoth, in the soul that has been corrupted. They are the protoplasmic body, mind, heart, lunar bodies. That lust that we've been watching in ourselves, that is a very gluttonous, arrogant lust. We call it lust, but really it's proud. Really, it's an angry lust too, and it's an envious lust. It isn't something vague. It is an entity that has a face and has a body. It has matter, it has energy, and trapped inside of it is consciousness, and that's in the 5th dimension, inside of you. And you made it. And you need to see it to kill it. A blind person cannot aim a gun, cannot wield a sword, cannot craft a painting. You have to see it. So it will come up in your life. Your trainer will bring it up. If you don't see it in your dreams and your meditation experiences, he'll bring it up in the physical world for you to see it in your heart and mind and body. Our obligation then is to see it. Not avoid it, not justify it, and in fact, not condemn it. See it. See it for what it is. The problem is that we tend to jump back and forth between craving and aversion. We like to blame things and judge things without seeing them for what they are. And ego is bad, of course. You don't need to stand there and judge it. You need to analyze it, study it, understand it, how it behaves, what stimulated it, what's it pushing you to do, what are its thoughts, what are its feelings, what is its taste, its flavor. And then in the evening, you meditate. And you visualize all of that. And you relax. And you get drowsy. And you meditate. And you visualize. And you relax. And you pray. And with patience, you will start to comprehend that pain, that desire, that longing does not come from God, will not produce benefit, will not solve your suffering, will not give you health or spiritual insight, and so must be destroyed. And little by little, gradually, you will start to see it for what it is, not only physically, but internally, through dreams, through visions, through comprehension. In other words, when you start to see these things for what they are, they start to lose power over you. You stop feeding them. they get weaker. When they weaken, they can be destroyed. They can be dissolved. This is what it means to boil the water. That boiling is caused by attention, energy. How do you boil something? You apply fire. So we have a mixture here, fire and water. And what happens in the boiling? When you apply fire to water, what happens? Firstly, the water changes its constitution, its temperature. Remember the elements? They all have these qualities, right? Fire affects temperature. And when you apply the fire to the water, you affect its fluidity. It boils, it moves. And what happens in that boiling? The water begins to mix with the air. Steam. The water is escaping. The water is being freed. And what else is happening? The water is separating from the solids. You see how all the elements are engaged here? This is psychological. This is why we need ordeals. It's the ordeals that help us dissolve, to take apart the psyche, to see its components, and to rearrange them in the good way. But you can only do that if you're working with space, Akash, the fifth element, which is what allows these things to be reorganized. And that is God. The quintessence, the kundalini, the prakriti, is the innermost, the Divine Mother. In other words, you need to be conscious, cognizant, present, utilizing your energy to awaken, to observe, to comprehend, to learn about yourself. This is the process of dissolving and coagulating, and dissolving and coagulating, and dissolving and coagulating continually, again and again, every day. It is not fast. It is slow. Here in this alchemical text, the Stone of the Philosophers, it is written about this. By the omnipotent God and on the salvation of my soul, I here declare to you, earnest seekers, in pity to your earnest searching, the whole philosophical work, which is only taken from one subject and perfected in one thing. For we take this copper and destroy its crude and gross body. We draw out its pure spirit, and after we have purified the earthy parts, we join them together, thus making a medicine of a poison. That's a very important text from Alchemy. Again, people read this and thought we're talking about physical copper, physical water, physical fire. It's not. It's psychological. It's spiritual. What is copper? Psychologically and spiritually, what is it? Copper is not just the physical element. Copper is something important in alchemy. Again, we talked about purifying metals. The symbol of copper looks like this. Anybody recognize that symbol? It's a sign of Venus. It's also the sign of Isis from the Egyptians. It's a very ancient symbol. And it is the secret of alchemy. It has many levels of meaning. Many. Firstly, you should know that this sign is feminine. It's related with the womb, which is that circle. And hanging below the circle is a cross. The cross is the four elements. The circle is the fifth element. The circle is the Divine Mother, Kundalini, the serpent biting its tail. The cross is the four elements: air, fire, water, and earth. Venus is the Divine Mother, the Kundalini itself. the Akash, the Prakriti, who makes possible all creation. The four elements hang from the Akash. They depend on it. They are born from the womb of the Divine Mother. Moreover, that cross is sex. So we see here a very sexual, psychological, spiritual symbol with levels and levels and levels of importance. But that quote said, we destroy this copper. The copper is feminine. It symbolizes Malkut, which is feminine. It symbolizes us. If you superimpose this symbol over the tree of life, you see that the circle, the Divine Mother, is the soul, the spirit, the monad, and the Trinity above. It's God. It's all that is pure, whole. See, a circle is whole, right? It forms the shape of wholeness, something perfect. And below that, we see the four bodies of sin, the physical person who hangs in dependence upon the circle above. But what is the part of this that no one sees, that we ignore? Even if you know this much, what is the part that we ignore, that we don't see? The emptiness inside the circle. It's the Ein Sof, the absolute. And what's in the center of that circle? Da'at, knowledge. The knowledge of how to transmute, to transform. So when that scripture says we need to destroy the copper, it's saying we need to destroy this entire tree of death and make it a tree of life. That is ourselves, Malkut, the feminine Sephira, that needs to be destroyed and purified. That's why we get the four elements, the four ordeals related to the four elements. We need that in order to be dissolved. So, success in that effort is not complicated. Success in that effort comes from applying the science daily, working with it consistently, purifying ourselves of impurities, working with ordeals, using our energy wisely, no longer providing energy to our egos, to our defects, to our vices, but redirecting those forces through willpower. Now, I know this is all pretty heavy and maybe discouraging, but I want to read you a beautiful poem that shows you that it's worth it. And this is from Rumi, a great Sufi poet. And this poem is about what happens to the faithful ones who retained their faith in God and performed the work that they were beholden to perform. And this is on the last day, when they are approaching their divinity, what happens to them. So the poem says this: the faithful will say on the last day, "O King, was not hell on the route all of us traveled? Did not faithful as well as infidels pass through it? Yet on our way we perceived not the smoke of the fire. Nay, it seemed paradise and the mansion of the blessed." Then the king will answer, "That green garden, as it appeared to you on your passage through it, was indeed hell, and the place of dread torment. Yet for you it became a garden green with trees. Since you have labored to make hellish lusts and the fire of pride that courts destruction, to make these, I say, pure and clean, and to please God have quenched those fires, so that the fire of lust, that erst breathed flame, has become a holy garden and a guiding light, since you have turned the fire of wrath to meekness, and the darkness of ignorance to shining knowledge. Since you have turned the fire of greed into bounty and the vile thorns of malice into a rose garden, since you have quenched all these fires of your own for my sake, so that those poisons are now pure sweets, since you have made fiery lust as a verdant garden and have sowed therein the seed of fidelity, so that nightingales of prayer and praise ever warble sweetly around this garden, since you have responded to the call of God and drawn water out of the hell of lust. For this cause my hell also, for your behoof, becomes a verdant garden and yields leaves and fruit. So to conclude, I'll read you one more quote, which is from another beautiful, that scripture, the bosom book of George Ripley, where he said, "Whoever hath this medicine, he hath an incomparable medicine above all the treasures of the world. Praise God." Do you have any questions? Yes.
Is there there's a connection between Christ, the lion, and ferocity? Is it? I saw there's a sculpture of Jesus with his hand on the lion's head. So is that also the sexual force? Or what is?
Yeah, the lion has many important symbols in esotericism. Of course, the lion related with Leo, which is a fire sign. Lions have a long history in the esoteric traditions. In ancient times, the lions were quite peaceful and served human beings as attendants and protectors. But because we became so corrupted, the lions became enraged against us. Symbolically, the lion can symbolize Christ, specifically as the law of karma. So that's why we look at, in the traditional Christian symbolism, sometimes Christ is represented as a lion or as calming the lion. And in some of the more ancient traditions, we see how Christ causes the lion to lie with the lamb. And that lamb is a symbol of Christ. So it's showing how Christ can calm the forces of karma on our behalf in order to aid us. And that's further symbolized in the Arcanum 11, in which we see the Divine Mother gently restraining the forces of the lion, which is our own karma. So yeah, the lion's an important symbol. And in alchemy, you find the lion symbolized in several ways, primarily as a green lion, as a red lion. And those are states of consciousness related to the development of the being. So in alchemy, it's many, many symbols related with lions. Any other questions? Is there an ordeal related specifically with the fifth element? Yeah. All the ordeals are related with the fifth element. Right, it's all of them. Yeah. Any other questions?
What would you say about morning dew?
If you're asking about morning dew in relation with alchemy, in certain alchemical texts, the symbolism of dew is related in many ways, and it has levels of meaning. The beginning level meaning is that it's related with the sexual energy that settles into the vital body every day and is delivered into the physical body. That morning dew is related to energies, fresh, psychospiritual, sexual energies that need to be harnessed and transformed daily. That's the most superficial level of meaning of dew. But there are many other levels that are not relevant today. Anything else back there? So how do we work in the astral body in order to progress as a soul? If you have the capability to awaken consciousness in the astral plane, then you can work with these ordeals more directly. Originally, these ordeals are applied to us internally in the astral mental plane. So the ones who awaken there and consciously transform those ordeals move more rapidly through them because they're able to comprehend things more directly and faster. But most of us don't have that capability. If you do, if you can awaken in the astral plane, take advantage of that. Pray to your innermost and say, what do I need? Show me what I need and help me work on it. Don't waste your time investigating other people's lives and going around and being curious. If you can awaken in the astral plane, use it to transmute yourself. And your innermost will be the one who will guide you in that process. Anything else?
Is there an ordeal related to space, expansiveness?
Yeah, that was the question I just answered. Is there an ordeal related with space or expansiveness? All the ordeals are related with the fifth element. More? No? Any other questions here?
So it's kind of like well, let me just say one thing. You said that Venus, maybe I heard you wrong before. You said Saturn was the Akash, or
Yeah, the planets also correspond to the elements. Yes.
so then obviously that quintessence would be in all of the planets.
That's right.
Right? So then, like, with the personality and everything, and karma and life, basically the innermost is in communication with everybody else's innermost almost, and kind of sets it up so...
It's complicated, right?
So there's argument for me to kind of comprehend. So, like, so then the situations of life can also kind of be like manure in a way to grow the seed, which is the
Yes, that's right. The entirety of our experience of life is driven by karma because we are so trapped in our karma. Whether we're working on ourselves or not, everything. And that karma is managed by our innermost. So we think we've got it hard right now. We are not facing all of our karma right now. Our innermost is managing our karma to keep us in a physical body with the hopes that we will work on ourselves. If all of our karma was applied to us right now, we would not be physically alive. Because the debts are too great. We would be in hell, recycled. So the entirety of the circumstances that we're within right now are managed by the limitations and forces being pushed through that karmic influence. What that means is that whether we're working on ourselves or not, everything that's happening to us is made by our own hands and guided by our own inner God. So if we complain, we're making a big mistake. Furthermore, if we're working on ourselves, that karmic scenario that we face from day to day is further manipulated by our innermost in order to more directly bring up the things we need to work on. So that karma, he starts to manage that and guide it to help us. Sometimes it's giving us more problems. And usually it's like that. Because we need that in order to grow. There's a very interesting quote that I just saw from the book Dayspring of Youth that says, the innermost will ignore most of the questions posed by the personality because they concern with material, physical things. The innermost doesn't care about that. And it's true. Most of the things that we pray about and we're so worried about and so upset about are completely meaningless and inconsequential, spiritually speaking. Their value spiritually is that we think they're important and that we're so hypnotized and confused by stupid things. And that's why we're put in those situations. God doesn't care about the situation itself, only that it can provide us a vehicle to see ourselves as we are. If God wanted us to have $1 million, we'd have it. If we deserved it, we would have it. If God wanted us to have a different physical body, we would have it. If we had earned it, if our karma determined it, we would have it. Whether we wanted it or not, we would have it. So from that point of view, you can see that the one who's really working on themselves suddenly realizes that everything that's happening in life is guided by God. That's pretty humbling. It's pretty amazing. And this is a point of view that's expressed in Tantra as well, where they state you have to learn to transform all poisons into medicine. And that's symbolized in Asian traditions by the peacock. The peacock eats poison and turns it into medicine. And that's what that alchemy quote was saying. That poison is the poison of our own mind. It's the poison of lust and pride and envy and hate. And that comes up in our daily lives, in the circumstances we face. We need to take those situations and eat them, meaning transform them, transmute them, and turn them into medicine. So really we have to realize that God, the innermost, is orchestrating everything around us to give us that food so that we can transform it into medicine, not only for ourselves, but for others. It's really beautiful. And it's really humbling when you become conscious of that. When you start to see every tiny detail of your life is being managed without exception. But we are so forgetful of the presence of God that we think we're abandoned and that we're lost and that everything is just happening by circumstance and coincidence and randomly, and that we are not, we're just on our own. We only feel and see that because we're so asleep. But when we start to really pay attention and awaken, you realize you are never alone. And every single instant, God is there trying to slap you and wake you up. We just need to realize it. Any other question back there?
When we are transmuting with pranayama through the day, should this be done physically, or it is better to be calm and imagine it? Should we feel it physically in our sexual organs, or is this too much exertion and counterproductive?
When you perform pranayamas through the day, pranayama should be performed physically. The purpose of the pranayama is to harness the vital energies that are in the physical body and vital body. So that practice should be done physically, not mentally. You can do it very quietly. You don't have to do it in an aggressive way. You can do pranayama silently, but be attentive to what you're doing. Furthermore, it is not necessary to feel physical sensations with pranayama. You might. But don't use physical sensations as a measure for whether you're being successful or not. Your measure should be your state of consciousness, the qualities you observe in your consciousness. That should be your measure. If you're doing pranayamas properly and effectively, you will find that it calms your mind, calms your heart, and strengthens your ability to retain mindfulness of yourself. That's the measure. If it's helping you to remember yourself, to retain presence here and now, then you're doing it right. If you are doing pranayamas and you're becoming more sexually agitated, you're doing it wrong. You need to manage your mind. Pranayama is like that which takes the steam off the boiling water. The water is boiling because of the fire of lust. And we do the pranayama to harness the wind, to take the energy out, and to let the waters settle. That's the purpose of pranayama. It isn't to stir up a big fire. It's to take the energy out. Have you ever seen what happens if there's a fire burning, raging, and you take all the air away? What happens? It goes out. Pranayama does that. Harness the wind, pranayama. you suck out the air. So the fire becomes calm. And then that energy becomes used by the consciousness. It should be. That's how it's supposed to work. More questions?
It has been said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Please elaborate about the relationship for teacher and student.
Okay, the question is, there's often heard the statement that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, physically is how most people interpret that saying, that when the student is prepared physically, that a physical teacher will appear. That might happen. But the real meaning is psychological and spiritual. The real meaning is that when your innermost has prepared you through lifetimes of ordeals, there will come a moment when your soul is so sick of suffering that you are ready to die. Then your master, your innermost, will appear and guide you to die so that you can be reborn. That's the meaning. But that appearance of the innermost is not before your physical eyes. Physically, you may not be aware of it. Physically, it may come up just as you finding the teachings and starting to practice. But that is the sign that the master has appeared, because you have been given the door and the key. If you want to know if your master has shown up, it's because you found the teachings. Your master has called you. So then it's up to you to transmute yourself.
Advice for astral projection from scratch according to your experience.
In order to learn astral projection, there are several key factors that you need to learn. The first is you need to learn to be here and now. To awaken in the astral world is not possible if you're asleep in the physical world. If you want to awaken in the astral plane, you have to awaken in the physical plane first. Because your state of consciousness is continuous through these planes. If you're asleep here, you'll be asleep everywhere. So awaken here and now. Make that your priority. And then naturally, spontaneously, you will awaken internally as well. The second part is, once you're working to awaken here and now, then you need to start saving energy, especially emotional energy. The astral plane is an emotional world. If you're wasting all your emotional energy through violence, through lust, through pride, through envy, through gluttony, through greed, through avarice, through all your old habits, you will have no energy to awaken in the astral plane. You need to save energy. That means transforming impressions and dying in your desires, renouncing them, understanding them, comprehending them, walking away from them, and saving that energy. For example, you become tempted by your lust. You want to look, you want to engage, you want to feel the sensations of lust. If you do it, you expend energy. And that energy is used to fortify that lust and deepen that karma. If instead you renounce and walk away and you do not expend energy there, you save energy. In fact, you might be extracting energy out of that lust that was tempted. This is how the soul becomes crystallized in us. And that energy then becomes available to the consciousness to use, unless we waste it 5 minutes later. It's a tightrope. It takes a lot of balance psychologically. It is very delicate. You have to be very attentive and cautious, especially with how you use energy, psychologically. If you conserve psychological energy, you will awaken. Whether you want it or not, you will. Any other questions?
What advice would you give to those starting to astral projecting, for those who begin to reach the astral and don't always know what
If you awaken consciousness in the astral plane, the most important thing you can do is pray to your God. Pray to your Divine Mother. Pray. Speak your heart. You need to develop and cultivate that relationship. It's the most important thing you have. If you awaken consciousness anywhere, anytime, physically or internally, this is the most important thing you can do. Remember God. Otherwise, you'll awaken in the astral plane and only be thinking of yourself, which is pride. And you'll go around feeding your pride, investigating people's lives, seeing how cool it is, having different kinds of experiences for your pride. In other words, you're deepening your suffering. If you remember God, if you remember your Buddha, your innermost, you can take advantage of that and transmute yourself. Learn. It won't always be easy, but it will be fruitful. I have a friend who, in the first few years of his practice in Gnosis, was able to get out of his body easily and any time he wanted. And he became the go-to guy in the group when anybody wanted to know anything. They'd go to him and say, hey, can you check out this and that for me? Can you go find out if such and such a thing? And so he loved it. Everybody relied on him, thought he was a big shot, and he could go off in his astral body and investigate all these different kinds of things. This went on for a little while. One day the switch was flipped to the off position, and his innermost took that away from him, and it shattered him. And I don't know if he ever recovered. Sad. There's a great danger in pride, so be aware of it. Any other question?
What is the historic meaning of the Ankh cross? Does that relate to Venus?
The Ankh cross is the same thing as the sign of Venus. It's exactly the same. The Ankh cross is the sign of Isis. Who is Venus? It's the sign of life. It's the sign of how the light of Christ, or Ra, reflects into the universe and creates all existing things. That's the role of Christ, the Divine Mother, Isis. It's all the same. Any other question? No? Thank you.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Will you help others to benefit from this knowledge? Most Gnostic schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. Every single donation helps. Make a donation now at gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the books published by Glorian Publishing and available from booksellers worldwide. Visit gnosticbooks.org to learn more. Thank you. May all beings be happy.